No one anticipated what was about to unfold. The Manhattan courtroom, already tense from weeks of high-stakes testimony, fell into a heavy, unnatural silence. Even the distant hum of the city seemed to vanish. Then came the slow shuffle of footsteps, measured, deliberate. All eyes turned as Janice Combs, the 83-year-old matriarch of the Combs family, was gently escorted into the courtroom. Gasps spread like wildfire through the packed gallery. Not her. Surely not her. Sean, Diddy Combs, stoic for most of the proceedings, finally broke. His jaw tightened. His posture, once relaxed and confident, now seemed strained. He leaned slightly forward as if to better understand what he was seeing, what no one could believe. His mother. Janice Combs. She walked slowly but purposefully, refusing a wheelchair, turning down assistance from court officers. Her silver-gray hair was swept back neatly. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between grief and resolve. She didn't look at her son. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked straight ahead, toward the witness stand. Even the judge, who'd remained impartial and composed through days of sensational testimony, blinked in disbelief. He adjusted his glasses and leaned slightly forward, as if questioning the moment's reality. The clerk swore her in. Her voice, though aged, was steady. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" She nodded. "I do." Then came the first question from the prosecution. "Mrs. Combs, do you understand why you're here today?" Another nod. "Yes." "Can you please tell the court, in your own words, why you chose to testify?" She looked down for a brief moment, collecting herself. Then she lifted her gaze, clear, unwavering. "Because truth matters. Even when it hurts. Especially then." The room held its breath. Janice Combs had long been seen as the quiet strength behind one of the most powerful figures in music and entertainment. A single mother who raised her son in Harlem, who supported his dreams, protected his legacy, and stood by him during past controversies. She was his shield, until now. Diddy sat frozen. His legal team whispered frantically among themselves, scanning notes, clearly blindsided. They hadn't prepared for this. What followed was unexpected, not sensational, not accusatory, but deeply human. Janice didn't offer explosive revelations, or dramatic accusations. What she gave was context. Painful, necessary context. She spoke of family dinners filled with laughter and unspoken tension. Of moral lines crossed in the name of ambition. Of moments where love conflicted with loyalty. She described a man driven to conquer the world, but slowly losing parts of himself in the process. "He is my son," she said. "But I cannot pretend not to see what he has become. I raised him better than this. And if speaking now can guide him, or stop this from continuing, then I must." There was a long pause. Not a murmur from the gallery. Then she turned, just slightly, and looked at her son. "Sean," she said softly, "I love you. But loving someone doesn't mean enabling them." The judge called for a recess. The moment was too raw, too powerful to continue without pause. Diddy remained seated, staring at the ground. No words. Just silence. Janice Combs was helped down from the stand. As she passed by her son, she didn't stop. She didn't falter. But a single tear traced its way down her cheek. Some in the gallery wiped away their own. The media would later call it the moment that turned the case. Pundits debated her motivations, questioned the timing, speculated about backroom deals. But those who were in the room knew, it wasn't about strategy. It wasn't about theatrics. It was about a mother choosing truth over silence. No one anticipated what was about to unfold. But once it happened, no one would ever forget it. Janice Combs had always stood by her son. She had held his hand through grief, through poverty, through the pain of losing his father to violence. She had prayed over him, worked multiple jobs, and pushed him to chase a dream most said was impossible. And he did, he rose. Sean Diddy Combs became a titan, music mogul, fashion icon, household name. But today was different. As she took her seat on the witness stand, the courtroom seemed to shrink. The chatter, the camera shutters, the murmurs, all faded. The silence was alive, waiting. She adjusted the microphone with frail, but steady hands. Then, eyes forward, she spoke. "I'm here because the truth matters," she said. "No matter how painful it is to speak it." The prosecution leaned in. The defense bristled. Diddy stared straight ahead, unmoving, but the slight twitch in his jaw betrayed him. Janice began slowly, carefully. "Not to dramatize, but to be understood. I've seen things. Over time. Small things, at first. Things a mother doesn't want to believe." She recalled changes in him. The ambition turning sharper. The smiles growing thinner. The people around him, staff, friends, even family, becoming quieter. More cautious. Afraid, sometimes. "There were moments I couldn't explain away," she said, voice soft but clear. "Moments that stayed with me long after I left his homes. I remember the way people moved around him. Like he carried weather. A storm." She paused. Looked toward the gallery, but not at any one person. Control. Sudden anger. Fear. Then she turned to a memory that made the courtroom hold its breath. In 2008, I visited Sean's home in Miami. It was supposed to be a quick trip. A birthday. I brought a peach cobbler I'd baked myself. But I remember the mood was off from the moment I arrived. She took a breath, steadying herself. Even at 83, the emotion clung to her. I saw a young woman being escorted out. She was crying. Her hands were shaking. Her phone had been taken. I heard staff whispering about what to say and what not to say. And I remember someone, maybe a bodyguard, saying, "Phones go in the basket." No questions. Whispers broke out in the courtroom. One juror visibly flinched. That's when Diddy's lawyer stood up. Objection. Irrelevant and speculative. But Diddy raised his hand, eyes still on his mother. "Let her speak," he said, voice low but firm. The courtroom fell silent again. The judge nodded. The lawyer, stunned, sat back down. Janice continued. "That moment haunted me. Not because I knew everything, but because I knew enough. Because I saw fear. And no child I raised should be surrounded by that." She looked directly at her son then. Her voice didn't waver. "Not once. You weren't raised like that, Sean. Your father was taken from us, and I swore I'd raise you to be better. Kinder. Strong. But I think somewhere along the way, power began to matter more than people. And I saw it in your eyes before I saw it in your actions." Diddy blinked, but said nothing. "I'm not here to destroy you. God knows I'm not," she said. "But I cannot keep pretending this is all lies and jealousy and noise. Because I know better. And deep down, Sean, so do you." The judge called a short recess. No one moved right away. Diddy leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands folded. His shoulders were tense. His lips pressed tight. He didn't look at his mother as she stepped down from the stand. She walked slowly past him, supported by a bailiff. As she passed his chair, she glanced down, not with anger, but with something heavier. disappointment, and love. The gallery was still. No reporters spoke. No cameras clicked. For a moment, the spectacle was gone. There was just a mother, a son, and a truth too heavy to carry silently anymore. Later, the clip would go viral. Pundits would debate its implications. Some would praise her courage. Others would question her motives. But those in the room knew better. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't theater. This was the hardest thing a mother could ever do. Tell the truth when it might break her own child. And do it anyway. Janice Combs once believed her son. Every time the headlines screamed accusations, every time the whispers got louder, she defended him. Because that's what mothers do. She told herself he was misunderstood, that the world wanted to tear down black success. That envy was louder than truth. But over time, the cracks appeared. They didn't shatter all at once. They spread slowly, like hairline fractures in a window, nearly invisible at first. A look here. A story there. Staff members who came and went without explanation. The ones who stayed. They spoke with their eyes, not their voices. And then came 2023. When Cassie filed her lawsuit, it felt like a bomb going off. Years of questions, doubts, and internal battles were suddenly staring her in the face, in black and white legal filings. Janice went to her son. She asked him directly. Because she had to. His response chilled her to the bone. "Mom," he said, "you don't build what I've built by playing by everyone else's rules." She didn't know how to answer that. She had no words. Just a tightness in her chest that hadn't gone away since. What rules was he talking about? Whose pain had paid the price for his empire? Then came the moment she could no longer pretend. Early in 2024, she was in his home, his fortress, and wandered into his office while waiting for him. It wasn't snooping. She was looking for a charger. Something mundane. But what she found changed everything. A list. Typed. Organized. Cold. It had names of women. Dozens. Some she recognized. Some she didn't. Next to each, a label. Handled. Watching. Potential problem. She froze. When he entered the room, he saw the paper in her hands. There was no panic. No fear. He just said, flatly, "That's business." But to her, it was something else. It was a confession written in plain language. A window into a life built on silence, intimidation, and power used not to uplift, but to dominate. And then the video surfaced. That was the final break. The footage of him assaulting Cassie wasn't blurred by lawyers or wrapped in PR spin. It was real. It was raw. It was brutal. And it shattered Janice. She watched it in silence, hands trembling, heart pounding. A part of her hoped it was fake. A deep part of her still wanted to believe in her son's innocence. But the screen didn't lie. "That broke my heart," she said quietly, as tears welled in her eyes. "Not because I didn't know he was capable. But because I had hoped he wasn't." She looked up, sitting on the witness stand, surrounded by press, attorneys, and strangers. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The weight of her words carried more power than a scream ever could. You raise a child to be strong. To survive. But you don't raise them to forget they're human. And when I saw that video, I realized I had lost my son a long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it. Diddy sat at the defense table, eyes forward, face blank. He didn't interrupt. He didn't object. Maybe he knew, there was nothing left to fight in that moment. Not against her. The courtroom remained still. You could hear breathing. Sniffling. The creak of someone adjusting in their chair. But no one spoke. Janice Combs wasn't here for revenge. She wasn't here for headlines. She was here because, after a lifetime of silence and denial, the truth had finally become louder than her fear. People will ask why I didn't speak sooner, she said, glancing at the jury. The answer is simple. I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want to believe the boy I raised could become the man in that video. But I saw it. I saw him. And I couldn't stay silent anymore. She stepped down from the stand slowly, her back straight, her dignity intact, even as her heart was in pieces. There was no applause. No cheers. Just silence. The kind of silence that only truth can bring. I love my son, Janice Combs said, her voice steady but heavy. But I can't pretend anymore. I can't stay silent. Too many people have been hurt. It wasn't a soundbite. It wasn't a performance. It was the moment everything changed. Her words rang out through the courtroom like a bell, sharp, clear, impossible to unhear. Until that point, the trial had been sensational. Witnesses. Footage. Confidential documents. But it was Janice, the mother who had once defended her son against the world, who pierced through the noise with something far rarer than outrage. Conviction. She wasn't angry. She was devastated. And that devastation carried more weight than 1,000 accusations. Psychologist Dr. Margaret Chen would later describe it as a moral tipping point, the precise moment when the case stopped being about celebrities, headlines, and legal strategy, and started being about something deeper. About truth. About accountability. About how even the most powerful must face the consequences of the worlds they create. Janice's testimony wasn't about details. It wasn't about timelines or paperwork. It was about pain. The kind that builds over years. The kind that hides in silences between family members. The kind you don't talk about until you have no choice. She had seen too much. Heard too much. And, in the end, loved too deeply to lie anymore. The gallery, packed with reporters, attorneys, survivors, and silent observers, sat motionless as her final words landed. If I lose him because of this, then so be it. But I won't lose myself, too. And then, in a moment no one predicted, the impossible happened. Sean Diddy Combs asked to take the stand. His lawyers objected. Whispered frantically. Tried to stop him. He waved them off. I need to speak, he said. The judge hesitated, then granted it. And for the first time, Sean Combs addressed the court not as a performer, not as a mogul, not as a brand. But as a man stripped bare. No defense. No press release. No denial. Just confession. He looked around the room, at the faces watching him, at the jurors trying to remain neutral, at his mother, who would not look away. I did it, he said quietly. I created a world where power meant everything. Where people around me bent to my will, and I convinced myself that was normal. The words hung in the air, thick with finality. I blurred lines. Between consent and coercion. Between business and control. Between love and ownership. And I justified it because I thought I earned it. He paused. But I was wrong. For years, he said, he believed his success gave him a pass. That fear and silence were just part of the industry. That if people stayed close, it meant they accepted the rules. I see now, he said, his voice cracking, they stayed because they were afraid. And I mistook that fear for loyalty. Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't damage control. It wasn't some PR stunt. It was a man finally stepping out from behind the image he'd curated for decades. The courtroom remained frozen. Not out of shock, but out of recognition. This was what truth sounded like. Raw. Imperfect. But undeniable. And in that moment, something shifted. For the survivors in the room, for those who had spoken up, those who had stayed silent, and those who had been watching from the shadows, this wasn't just a victory. It was validation. A billionaire admitting guilt. A system exposed. A mask removed. When Diddy stepped down from the stand, he didn't look to his lawyers. He didn't look to the cameras. He looked only at Janice. And for the first time, he didn't find comfort in her gaze. He found accountability. Later, the media would dissect every word. Legal analysts would speculate on sentencing. Documentarians would start editing their reels. But those who were there, those who heard her voice and saw him break, understood something bigger had happened. Not just justice, but truth. And it started with a mother finally choosing to speak. Diddy changed his plea to guilty. In the courtroom, he looked hollow, stripped of swagger, of image, of control. No longer the untouchable mogul. Just a man, undone by the weight of accountability. His voice barely carried as the judge read the sentence. His eyes didn't rise. He didn't fight. There was no performance left. Outside, the world reeled. Victims, once silenced by fear and power, began to speak. Some whispered. Some shouted. But they spoke. And for the first time, the world listened. Fans who once worshipped him now questioned themselves. Was the music worth the silence? Was the icon ever who they thought he was? The music industry, long protected by silence and spin, found itself under a harsh new light. Labels scrambled. Executives distanced themselves. The system that enabled him was now forced to examine itself. And at the center of it all stood Janice Combs. Not just a grieving mother. Not just a witness. A truth teller. She had loved her son deeply. Enough to hope. Enough to doubt. But also enough to expose him. In doing so, she didn't just shift a courtroom. She changed the culture. She reminded the world that real love is not blind. That silence can be complicity. And that even when it breaks your heart, you speak. Because sometimes, the only path to justice is through the ones we love the most.